My daughter announced my removal like it was part of dessert. One hand rested on my 71st birthday cake, the other dangled my house keys over the table while she smiled at 30 people and said, "Dad will be somewhere safer by Friday." Behind her, my son-in-law had already stuffed my flannel shirts into black contractor bags and lined them up by the mudroom door like curb trash. My jaw locked so hard I tasted blood. So I gave her 5 words that turned the whole room silent. "I sold the house this morning." That was only the beginning. She didn't know who was waiting at the end of the driveway, why my granddaughter couldn't look at her, or what I'd found folded inside a cream envelope 3 nights earlier. And if you've ever seen family wrap cruelty in a smile, stay with me because what happened before that sentence made it hit a lot harder. The truth is, Kelly didn't start by trying to throw me out. She started by straightening cushions. That's how people like her do it. They don't kick the door in. They adjust the room until you stop recognizing it. The first time I felt it, she was standing in my living room with both hands on her hips, staring at the recliner where I'd spent most evenings since my wife died. The chair was old brown leather, cracked at the arms, patched underneath with a piece of denim Marianne had sewn in by hand when the springs started going. Kelly pinched the bridge of her nose and said, "Dad, this room could breathe if you let it." Could breathe. Like I was the thing taking the oxygen out of my own house. The house sat on Birch Hollow Road, a brick 2-story with a deep porch and white oak floors. I laid myself on my knees one November while Marianne read out measurements from a yellow legal pad. There was a dent in the pantry trim where Kelly had rammed a toy stroller into it at 4 years old, a faint burn mark on the back patio where I dropped a sparkler the summer she turned 10, and a scratch on the inside of the front door where our old shepherd Duke used to jump when he heard my truck. It was the kind of house that kept time and scars. The kind that proved somebody had stayed. Kelly used to love that about it. When she was little, she'd run her fingers over the gouges in the banister and make me tell the story behind each one. When Marianne and I finished building the place, my wife tied the front door key to a navy ribbon and handed it to me in the driveway. "This is the key to what we survived," she said. I kept that brass key in the top drawer of the sideboard for 28 years. Then Marianne got sick and keys started feeling like little metal lies. Pancreatic cancer doesn't just take a person. It changes the pressure in the whole house. You start closing doors softly. You start counting pills by lamplight. You start measuring time in lab calls and soup bowls and whether the coughing woke them before dawn. I slept on a chair beside our bed the last 3 months because every time I laid flat, I thought I'd miss her breathing change. Kelly was good in those days. Or maybe I wanted to believe she was. She drove to appointments when I was too tired to trust myself on the highway. She sat with her mother and rubbed lotion into her hands. She cried into my shoulder at the funeral so hard I had to brace my knees to stay standing. For a while, grief made us look like a family from the outside. That should have comforted me. It didn't last. About 6 months after the funeral, Kelly began dropping by unannounced with throw pillows, candles, little glass jars of bath salts I never opened. She'd move things while she talked. A framed picture of Marianne and me from Cape May would migrate from the mantel to the piano. The piano lamp would disappear and be replaced by some skinny brass thing that looked decorative and useless. "I'm helping," she'd say if I noticed. "The house needs updating." The word updating started showing up a lot. So did practical. "Dad, you don't need a formal dining room for one. Dad, this china just sits here. Dad, those curtains make the place feel heavy." Every sentence sounded harmless by itself. That's what made it slippery. Brent was worse because he pretended not to care. Brent had that polished contractor look, white teeth, expensive watch, sleeves rolled exactly twice, always smelling faintly of cedar and somebody else's money. He built luxury kitchens for people who said words like bespoke without laughing, and after a while he started looking at my house the same way he looked at properties. Never as a home. Always as square footage. One Sunday he stood at my kitchen island eating the roast chicken I'd made and said, "You know what your lot alone would go for right now?" I kept carving and said, "I've managed not to lose sleep over it." He grinned like we were sharing a joke. "I'm just saying there's a lot of dead equity in sentiment." Kelly didn't scold him. She only sipped her wine and looked out toward the backyard where Marianne had planted hydrangeas in 3 neat rows. That was the first moment I remember thinking they were both looking at the house without seeing me in it. I should have pushed harder then. Instead, I did what fathers like me have a bad habit of doing. I paid for peace. Over the years, I'd helped Kelly so many times I could have wallpapered the den with receipts. $9,000 for her last semester at Temple when she called crying because she'd spent her tuition refund on an apartment lease with Brent before she told us. $12,000 when Brent's first contracting business blew through cash and they were just between draws. $26,000 after their condo flooded and insurance fought them for months. I took an early pension penalty once because Kelly swore it was temporary and Ava was starting private school and, "This isn't for me, Dad, it's for your granddaughter." I still have the carbon copies in a dented tin box from the hardware store where I worked summers in high school. Marianne used to say I kept too many papers. But paper remembers when people don't. What happened next made those old check stubs feel like witness statements. It started with my mail. For 40 years, the mail landed in a brass slot beside the kitchen door and I picked it up after breakfast. Suddenly, half the time Kelly already had it. "I was just sorting junk," she'd say. Or, "I didn't want your bills piling up." Once I found an envelope from the county tucked under a stack of cookbooks in the pantry. It had been opened. I held it up and asked, "Why is this in here?" She didn't even blink. I thought it was a tax circular. It wasn't. It was a notice about updated property assessments. A week later, a man I didn't know was standing in my front yard with a laser measuring tool. He wore loafers too clean for real work and kept glancing between my roofline and his tablet. I walked out and said, "Can I help you?" He gave me that quick embarrassed smile men use when they realize the old guy on the property still has a voice. "Sorry, I may have the wrong address. I'm here for an exterior review." "Who sent you?" He checked the tablet. "A Kelly Mercer inquiry." Mercer was Kelly's married name. When I confronted her, she pressed her fingertips to her temples like I was the difficult one. "Dad, relax. Brent wanted a ballpark estimate for adding a first-floor suite if you ever needed one." If I ever needed one. That sentence sat in me like bad food. I started paying attention after that. Real attention. Not the tired widower kind where you tell yourself your daughter means well because the alternative hurts too much. I noticed the strips of blue painter's tape under two end tables in the den. I noticed Brent taking pictures of the upstairs hallway for flooring ideas. I noticed Kelly asking, casual as rain, whether Marianne's name had ever been on the deed and whether probate had fully cleared all that. Nobody asks about probate at a fruit platter unless they've already been having another conversation somewhere else. Then came the dinner that should have ended it. Kelly wanted to host one of her client appreciation evenings at my place because, as she put it, the house has real warmth, and people sign faster when they feel at home. I said no the first time. She laughed like I was being adorable. The second time she said it was already in motion and the caterer was booked. By the time I realized she wasn't asking, there were white rental chairs on my lawn and votive candles lining the hallway where Marianne used to put out carved pumpkins every October. I went downstairs in my own house wearing clean jeans and a pressed blue shirt, and Kelly took one look at me and whispered, "Dad, maybe stay in the study until after the toast." I honestly thought I had misheard her. Stay in the study. You know how these events are. Brent's trying to land the Hawthorne account, and we need a certain flow. A certain flow. I looked past her into the dining room. My silverware. My wife's linen runner. Strangers with champagne standing under the light fixture. I rewired myself after Kelly stuck a butter knife in the socket at age 7. And my daughter was asking me to hide because I didn't match the room. My hands went cold first. Then hot. I said very quietly, "You want me upstairs while you borrow my life." She exhaled like I was exhausting. "Please don't make this emotional." There it was. The little knife. Not "don't make this cruel. Don't make this emotional." I didn't go upstairs. I sat in Marianne's chair at the edge of the living room and listened to Brent tell a surgeon from Villanova that he basically curated the property. Kelly laughed in that soft polished way of hers and said, "It photographs beautifully, doesn't it?" Photographs beautifully. At the end of the night, after the guests left and the smell of seared scallops and expensive perfumes still hung in the curtains, I found a smear of red wine on Marianne's embroidered tablecloth and one of her serving spoons bent at the handle. I stood at the sink with that spoon in my hand for a long time. But even then, I still didn't know how far they'd already gone. 3 mornings later, I had a dizzy spell in the garage. It was nothing dramatic. I bent too fast getting a box of snow melt off the shelf, stood up quick, and the room shifted sideways for maybe 3 seconds. I sat on the workbench until it passed, drank water, and went about my day. Ava happened to stop by around noon to drop off banana bread from the bakery where she worked weekends, and I told her what happened because she always listened without trying to manage me. Ava had Marianne's eyes and Kelly's mouth, which made it hard sometimes. She was 26 then, newly engaged, smart enough to hear what people meant, not just what they said. She frowned and told me to call my doctor, so I did. He ran tests the next week, adjusted a blood pressure medication and said, "Stand up slower, Frank. Welcome to being 70. I laughed. That should have been the end of it. By dinner, Kelly knew. Ava must have mentioned it out of concern, because Kelly came over carrying brochures before I'd even had my soup. Not hospital brochures. Senior living brochures. Places with names like Willow Gables and Cedar Haven, full of smiling gray-haired couples holding mugs in fake sunlight. She spread them across my kitchen table on top of the crossword I was doing. "What is this?" I asked. "Options," she said. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case we stop pretending everything's fine." That sentence hit harder than I let show. Not because I thought I was invincible. Because there's a particular kind of humiliation in watching your own child rehearse your disappearance while you're still chewing dinner. I pushed the brochures back toward her. "I got lightheaded in the garage, Kelly. I wasn't found wandering a highway." She gave me a thin look over the rims of her glasses. "You live alone in a large house. You forget things. You've left burners on." "I forgot a kettle once. Twice. It screamed both times, so I'd call that a system." Brent laughed from the doorway. He'd come in without knocking. "Frank, nobody's saying this has to be a big drama. We're just trying to be responsible." Responsible. There it was again. That language people use when they want control without admitting appetite. I said no. Clearly. Calmly. More than once. They heard inconvenience. After that, the campaign got cleaner and crueler. Kelly started speaking about me in front of me, which is a trick people use when they want to shrink you without raising their voices. "He gets stubborn in the afternoons. His memory's not what it was. He gets confused by paperwork." She said it at the pharmacy, at church, once to my neighbor Linda while I was standing right there holding a bag of tomatoes from the farmer's market. I watched the story of me change in other people's eyes before I ever agreed to it. Then I found the first real clue. It was raining that Thursday, the kind of thin cold spring rain that makes the gutters tick. Kelly had left her tote on the mudroom bench while she went upstairs to check my linen closet, which was not a job that required her presence in my house to begin with. Her phone kept vibrating. I wasn't going to snoop. I need you to understand that. I was raised by a man who thought reading somebody else's mail was 1 inch below stealing. Then a thick cream envelope slid halfway out of her open tote and hit the floor. Across the front, in neat black type, were the words Willow Gables Residency Agreement. My stomach went tight. I picked it up, meaning only to put it back, and a second paper slid free behind it. A deposit receipt. Non-refundable. Move-in date reserved. Friday, June 14th. My birthday was June 10th. The receipt had been paid from an account ending in 4432. That was the joint emergency account I had opened years earlier during Marianne's chemo so Kelly could help with bills if I was at the hospital. I hadn't used it in months. There had still been money in it. I heard Kelly's heels on the stairs and slid the papers back just before she came around the corner. She smiled too quickly. "Everything okay?" I looked straight at her and said, "Fine." That was the moment I stopped mistaking love for safety. The next morning I went downtown and sat in the office of Evelyn Shaw, the attorney who had handled Marianne's estate. Evelyn was 70 if she was a day, silver bob, sharp blue suits, eyes like drill bits. Marianne trusted her because she could spot rot through paint. When I told her pieces of what was happening, she didn't interrupt. She only folded her hands and asked, "Frank, have you signed anything recently that Kelly could be using beyond what you intended?" I thought about hospital forms. Bank signature cards. Old authorizations from when Marianne was dying. "Nothing about my house," I said. She turned her monitor toward me. "The deed is solely in your name. Clear. No transfer. No trust change. No encumbrance. But if someone were trying to build a case for incompetence or undue influence, they would start by creating a pattern." I frowned. A pattern. Concerns. Stories. Documents. Third-party observations. The lie comes before the paperwork. I sat there hearing Kelly say he gets confused by paperwork, and suddenly it wasn't annoying anymore. It was scaffolding. Evelyn leaned back. "You need eyes open, accounts reviewed, and copies of everything." Quietly. I nodded. "And if I find proof?" Her expression didn't change. "Then you stop being polite." I wish I could tell you I walked out of that office feeling strong. I didn't. I walked out feeling old in the worst way, like the world had shifted under my shoes while I was busy mourning my wife. Still, I followed instructions. I changed the online passwords Kelly knew. I pulled bank statements. I started keeping a notebook in the kitchen drawer beside the navy ribbon key, writing dates and comments the way Marianne used to log her medications. April 29th, exterior measurement man. May 3rd, Kelly removed county envelope. May 7th, Willow Gables deposit from old emergency account. May 9th, Brent photographed upstairs hall. It felt ridiculous at first. Petty. Small. Then the pattern started looking back at me. There were charges on the old emergency account I hadn't authorized. A notary service. A records retrieval fee. A background service subscription under Brent's email. There was also a charge to a company called Hearthline Staging. Staging. That word made my whole spine go hard. The same afternoon, Kelly called and asked if I'd be home Friday because someone may swing by to discuss accessibility modifications. When I said no one was discussing anything unless I invited them, she went quiet for a beat too long. Then she said, "Dad, you can make this easy or you can make it ugly." Not loud. Not angry. Just flat. That was the first time she let me hear the steel without the velvet around it. I said, "Easy for who?" She sighed. "For everybody." There is something almost impressive about how greed teaches people to pronounce selfishness as burden. She sounded tired. Put upon. As if my continued existence in my own home was a scheduling issue she'd been noble enough to shoulder. I hung up on her. I thought I was finally ahead. I was wrong. 2 nights later, Ava asked if she could come by after work. Her voice sounded strained, and when I opened the door, she didn't hug me the way she usually did. She just stepped inside, still in her bakery apron, and looked over her shoulder before I shut the door. "Grandpa," she said, "we need to talk in the den. There are words you never hear casually from people who love you. We need to talk is one of them." She sat on the edge of Marianne's old sofa and pulled a large manila envelope out of her tote. Her fingers were shaking. "I found this in Mom's printer tray," she said. I think she forgot I was there when she went upstairs. I took the envelope. Inside were copies. A drafted petition for emergency guardianship with my name across the top. A physician evaluation request I had never seen. A typed incident summary describing me as increasingly disoriented, financially reckless, resistant to care, and prone to aggression. Aggression. The man who still rinsed jam jars before recycling them had apparently become a danger. Underneath that was something even uglier, an unsigned offer sheet from an LLC called Hollow Ridge Holdings to buy my house at almost $200,000 under market, contingent on vacancy and expedited family cooperation. Brent's business address was on the footer. I read the page twice because my eyes refused to accept it the first time. Ava swallowed. "There's more." She handed me the last document. A durable power of attorney with my name typed under a signature line. Above it was a signature that looked almost like mine if you saw it from across a room. Same slope. Same F. Same last name loop. Almost. Not mine. The room went so quiet I could hear rainwater moving in the downspout outside. Ava started crying before I did anything. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know how bad it was until tonight. Mom told Brent she needed this filed before your birthday dinner because once you were placed, the rest would move fast." Placed. Like I was furniture. I set the papers down very carefully because I was suddenly afraid of what my hands might do. "Why are you telling me?" Her face crumpled. "Because Grandma would hate me if I didn't." That was the midpoint of everything. The moment the fog burned off. The little comments, the brochures, the staging fee, the mail, the soft public concern, it all snapped into one clean line. They weren't worried about me. They were building a case. Move me into assisted living under the banner of safety, use my own money to fund the first step, then sell the house cheap to Brent's shell company and call it efficient family management. I felt sick. Then I felt clear. I looked at Ava and said, "Does anyone else know you have these?" She shook her head. "Good." I stood up, walked to the sideboard, opened the top drawer, and took out Marianne's brass key tied to that faded navy ribbon. Ava watched me like she was trying to understand why. I closed my fist around the key until the teeth bit my palm. "They think I'm already gone," I said. "Let's disappoint them." The next 10 days were the quietest war I've ever fought. Evelyn moved fast. Faster than Kelly believed I still could. She pulled the bank records, documented the unauthorized transfers, and told me to stop discussing anything with my daughter beyond simple logistics. "Let them think the plan is working," she said. "People get sloppy when they smell success." She was right. Kelly called twice a day after that, suddenly sweet again. "Dad, what do you want for your birthday dinner?" "Dad, I found a lovely place with gardens." "Dad, maybe pack just the essentials first so it doesn't feel overwhelming." Each sentence came wrapped in concern so polished it could have been displayed under glass. I let my voice go tired on purpose. "Maybe you're right," I told her once. The silence on her end wasn't relief. It was victory. Meanwhile, Evelyn contacted a broker she trusted and quietly circulated the property to 3 families who had already lost bidding wars in the district and were prepared to move quickly. Not developers. Not LLCs, families. People who wanted a house, not a conversion. I insisted on that. If Birch Hollow was leaving me, it wasn't going to become some smug open-concept monument to bad taste and hidden lighting. The buyers ended up being a schoolteacher named Elena Ruiz and her husband Marcus, a physical therapist with 2 foster boys who'd been sharing one bedroom in a condo for 3 years. They came through on a drizzly Tuesday evening after Kelly had left. Elena stood in Marianne's garden for a long time without speaking. Marcus ran a hand over the pantry trim and smiled at the stroller dent. One of the boys asked if the tree in back was climbable. For the first time since all this started, I felt something besides anger. I sold them the house for fair market value with one condition: leave the hydrangeas alone until at least next spring. Elena laughed softly and said, "We can do that." The closing was set for the morning of my birthday dinner. Kelly had chosen the dinner because she wanted witnesses. That turned out to be helpful. There was one more thing I had to do before then. I rewrote my will. Not out of spite. Out of accuracy. Kelly had spent years treating generosity like an automatic payment, as if fatherhood meant permanent access. It didn't. Evelyn helped me create the Marianne Hale Trust with the sale proceeds. A portion went to me for my care and housing, secure and untouchable. A large portion went to Ava in structured distributions, protected from marital claims and bad decisions not her own. Another portion funded trade school scholarships in Marianne's name for kids from our county who could work with their hands but didn't have tuition money. Kelly got a small fixed amount and a letter. Not enough to reward what she had become. Enough to prove I hadn't acted in blind rage. When I signed the documents, my hand shook once. Not from doubt. From grief. Because this wasn't only about property. It was the official burial of the family story I had been trying to keep alive long after the people in it stopped deserving it. The morning of my birthday, I closed on the house at Evelyn's office at 9:22. By 10:15 the deed had recorded. By noon the funds had transferred into the trust structure. By 1 the locksmith Elena recommended had changed the side door and back door cylinders and rekeyed the front lock to a new set for the Ruiz family, while preserving the original brass key I'd asked to keep for sentimental reasons. By 3 I was sitting in a small furnished rental cottage on the edge of Lake Mercer, eating half a ham sandwich and staring at a willow tree shaking in the wind, feeling like I had amputated a limb to save my life. At 5:30 I drove back to Birch Hollow for my own birthday dinner. I parked half a block away because I didn't want Kelly seeing the locksmith van at the curb too soon. The house was lit like a wedding. Through the front windows I could see candles, flowers, hired servers and black shirts, even a string trio on the back patio because apparently removing your father from his home goes best with violins. My chest tightened so hard I had to sit with both hands on the steering wheel before I could get out. I wish I could tell you I felt triumphant walking up that path. I felt terrified. Not of them. Of the finality. A house can hold a marriage after the people are gone. It can store laughter in drywall. It can catch the exact angle of your wife's shadow at 5 in the afternoon and hand it back to you years later without warning. Selling it hurt. I need that said plainly. Justice doesn't cancel loss. Sometimes it costs it. Then I saw my shirts in the mudroom through the glass. Black contractor bags. Tied at the top. And whatever softness was left in me for that evening ended there. Inside, Kelly had gathered exactly the kind of audience she thought would protect her version of events. Neighbors, church friends, 2 of Brent's clients, her in-laws, Ava and her fiancé Daniel, even Pastor Reeves. If she could move me out in front of enough respectable faces, then later she'd only have to describe it as a difficult but loving intervention. She had built herself a human shield made of witnesses. She kissed my cheek when I entered. "There he is," she said too brightly. "Birthday boy." I smelled her perfume and underneath it the sharp chemical sweetness of fresh peonies. She'd put peonies on Marianne's dining table. My wife hated peonies indoors because they dropped ants when you brought them in from the garden. "Sit, Dad," Kelly said. "We want to do the toast before dinner." Of course she did. Brent stood near the fireplace with a hand in his pocket, looking confident enough to be bored. Ava kept staring at her water glass. Daniel's jaw was set hard. Pastor Reeves smiled at me in that careful pastoral way people do when they know something uncomfortable is coming and hope prayer will make them look useful. Kelly lifted her wine glass. The room dimmed around the edges for a second, not from age this time, but from pure rage pressing against my skull. She smiled the smile I used to mistake for my little girls. "Before we celebrate Dad, there's a family matter we need to share. We've all been worried for a while, and after a lot of discussion, we've found a beautiful place where he'll have help, community, and safety. We know change is hard, but movers are coming Friday and..." She raised my house keys slightly, like a hostess signaling the next course. That was when I said it. "I sold the house this morning." No one moved. The words didn't land all at once. You could actually watch them travel. Pastor Reeves blinked first. Brent's smile flattened. Kelly laughed a tiny confused laugh, like I'd made an old man joke. "Dad," she said, still smiling, "this isn't the moment." I reached inside my jacket, took out the closing folder and set it on the table beside the cake. "It's exactly the moment." Her face changed by degrees. Annoyance. Calculation. Then the first real crack. Brent stepped forward. "Frank, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the deed recorded at 9:22 this morning," I said. "I'm talking about the family who owns this house now. I'm talking about how bold you have to get before you start bagging a man's clothes before telling him he's being removed from his own home." The room went thin and electric. Kelly put her glass down too hard. "You are confused." "No," I said. "That was the story. This is the correction." Then Evelyn came in through the front door. I had asked the server to let her in at 6 sharp. She walked straight into the dining room carrying 2 slim folders, nodded to me and said, "Good evening." Her voice could have frosted water. Behind her stood Elena and Marcus Ruiz, not entering fully, just visible enough in the foyer to turn the air stranger. Kelly actually looked offended. "Who are these people?" "The buyers," I said. Brent took one hard step toward me. "This is insane." Evelyn opened the first folder and slid copies across the table. "Not insane. Recorded. Also documented are the unauthorized withdrawals from Mr. Hale's emergency account, the non-consensual memory care deposit, and the draft guardianship petition prepared without medical basis." Kelly's color drained. "You went through my things?" Ava stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "No. I did." Every head turned. I'll never forget Kelly's expression then. Not guilt first. Betrayal. That was the sickest part. She looked at her own daughter like loyalty had been stolen from her. "Ava," she said in a low warning voice. But Ava didn't sit back down. "I found the papers in your printer. I heard you tell Brent you needed Grandpa placed before the birthday dinner so the sale could move. I saw the forged signature." Brent snapped. "It wasn't forged, it was a draft." Evelyn didn't miss a beat. "Excellent. Then you won't mind explaining the notary charge, the Shell LLC offer, and the attempted transfer strategy to investigators." The word investigators hit the room like dropped glass. Pastor Reeves inhaled sharply. One of Brent's clients muttered, "Jesus Christ." Kelly's mother-in-law actually covered her mouth. Kelly straightened her spine and tried one last costume change. "Hurt daughter. Public victim. Dad, we were trying to help you. You've been forgetful, isolated, emotional since Mom died." "Your mother," I said, and my voice came out so calm it scared even me, "died in this house with my hand in hers. Don't use her as upholstery." She froze. I took the second folder from Evelyn and opened it myself. Inside was the copy of the guardianship petition describing me as aggressive, confused, financially reckless. I held it up so Pastor Reeves could see it, so the neighbors could see it, so every person Kelly had gathered to validate her could read the man she had invented. "You told people I leave burners on," I said. "You told people I'm unsafe. You called me confused while you used my dead wife's emergency account to reserve me a room I never asked for. You had your husband's company lined up to buy this house under market once I was out. That isn't concern. That's elder fraud with catering." That was the line that broke the room. Someone let out a shocked laugh they immediately tried to swallow. Brent's face went red so fast it looked painful. He stepped toward me again, and this time Daniel moved between us without saying a word. Just planted himself there, broad shoulders, wedding ring hand loose at his side. I loved him for that in a way I can't fully explain. Kelly pointed at Ava with a trembling finger. "You have no idea what he's been like. You don't see him day to day." Ava's voice shook but it didn't break. "I see enough to know you packed his clothes before he agreed to anything." Silence. Then Marcus Ruiz, still standing near the foyer, spoke quietly. "We can come back later if this is not the right time." I looked at him and almost laughed from the sheer mercy of that sentence. Even now, even here, the new owner of my house was offering me more dignity than my own daughter had. "No," I said. "Stay." Because this part mattered. I turned back to Kelly. "You wanted a public moment, so here it is. I'm not moving to Willow Gables. You are not handling my affairs. You will not touch the trust created today. You will not step into this house again after tonight unless the Ruiz family invites you. And if you contact any facility, bank, county office, or attorney pretending authority over me, Evelyn will hand everything to the district attorney with my full cooperation." Brent scoffed but it came out thin. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Evelyn looked at him. Mr. Mercer, there is nothing proportionate about preparing false incapacity documents so you can acquire a man's home through an affiliated LLC. He opened his mouth, closed it. Kelly made one last move, and honestly, it was the ugliest of the night because it was the most human. Her eyes filled. Dad, she whispered, you do this to your own daughter? I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said, no, Kelly. I did this because you were willing to do it to your father. That ended it. Not with shouting. Not with a slap. Not with some movie-sized collapse. With truth landing where she couldn't talk over it. Brent grabbed his jacket first. Of course he did. Men like him always leave when the room stops reflecting them correctly. Kelly stood there a second longer, looking around as if someone might still rescue her version of the evening. Nobody did. Pastor Reeves looked at the table. The neighbors looked at their hands. Ava was crying openly now. Daniel had a hand between her shoulders. Kelly set my keys down beside the cake. Not gently. Then she walked out without saying happy birthday. The front door closed. The string trio on the patio had long since gone quiet. Somewhere in the kitchen, a server set down a tray too carefully, trying not to make sound in a house that had just split open. I stood there feeling 71 and 40 and 12 all at once. Evelyn touched my elbow. You all right? No, I said honestly. Then I took a breath. But I will be. The rest of the evening unfolded in the strangest, tenderest fragments. Elena Ruiz apologized again for being present. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. Pastor Reeves, to his credit, came over and said, I should have asked more questions. I nodded because that was enough for one night. Ava hugged me so hard my shoulder popped. I didn't even mind. She kept saying, I'm sorry, and I kept telling her, you saved me. That's what you did. Before I left, I went to the sideboard drawer one last time. It was empty, of course. I already had the brass key in my pocket. Still, I opened and closed it just to hear the wood run on the track. A habit of the house saying goodbye. Then I walked out the front door, handed Elena the new key set, and kept Marianne's old brass key tied to its frayed navy ribbon. I never slept in Birch Hollow again. The fallout came fast after that. Kelly tried to call for 3 straight days. I let Evelyn handle the first round and ignored the rest. Brent sent one email full of legal bluster and fake outrage that ended in complete silence once Evelyn replied with copies of the bank activity, the guardianship draft, and notice of a formal elder financial abuse complaint if they continued. Funny how quickly confidence drains when paper starts talking back. Their life didn't implode all at once. Real consequences usually don't. They arrive as denied access, canceled expectations, people returning calls more slowly than before. One of Brent's clients dropped his firm after hearing enough of the story to get nervous. Kelly lost a board position at her church fundraiser committee because optics matter a great deal to people who spend their lives weaponizing them. The unauthorized account use had to be repaid. They did repay it too because settlement money stings less than public filings. Ava postponed her wedding by 4 months. Not because of money. Because she said she needed to understand what family meant before standing in front of a room and promising to build one. I respected that. In the end, she and Daniel got married in a small ceremony by the lake behind my rental cottage, and when she asked who should walk her down the path, she looked right at me. That nearly finished me. As for me, I bought a small 1-story place on the east side of the lake with a screened porch, a cracked flagstone path, and just enough yard for 3 hydrangea bushes if I felt brave enough to start over. No grand staircase. No formal dining room. No dead equity in sentiment, as Brent would say. Just peace. I took only what mattered. Marianne's recipe box. The patched leather recliner Kelly said killed the room. The hardware store tin full of receipts. A photo of Kelly at age 6 in rain boots holding a worm-like treasure, which I still haven't found the heart to throw away. And the brass front door key on the navy ribbon, though it no longer opened Birch Hollow. I hung it by my new kitchen window anyway. Because Marianne had been right. It was never just a key. It was proof of what we survived. Kelly and I did not repair things. Some breaks tell the truth too cleanly to cover back up. She sent a letter 6 months later, 3 pages of explanation, 1 paragraph of apology, the kind people write when they still want their motives understood more than they want your pain acknowledged. I read it once and folded it away. Maybe one day I'll answer. Maybe I won't. Peace doesn't always require a final speech. What I do have is Ava. Sunday breakfast. Daniel fixing the loose porch step before I can ask. 2 foster boys named Mateo and Lucas racing through Birch Hollow now. If Elena's Christmas card was anything to go by, muddy shoes on the same back steps where Kelly used to leave chalk drawings for Marianne to admire after work. That house sounds alive again. That matters to me more than keeping it ever could have, once I knew what it was turning me into. People hear my story and assume the satisfying part was selling the house out from under my daughter. It wasn't. The satisfying part was seeing clearly. Seeing that love without respect becomes permission. That generosity without limits becomes training. That silence, if you stretch it too far, starts helping the wrong people. I spent years believing being a good father meant absorbing damage quietly. What I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing a father can do, even for the child who betrayed him, is refuse to fund the lie they've built their character around. Last winter, after the first heavy snow, I stood at my new kitchen sink before sunrise and watched the lake smoke in the cold. The house was small enough that the coffee reached every room. My knees hurt. The porch light needed replacing. One of the hydrangeas looked doubtful about making it till spring. I felt better than I had in years. Not younger. Not untouched. Just clean. I reached over the window frame and touched that old brass key where it hung from its faded ribbon. Metal worn smooth by decades of hands. A key to a door that no longer belonged to me, and somehow that no longer hurt the same way. Because the house Kelly thought was mine was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the dignity I finally stopped giving away. And this time I kept the key.